Welcome to the final video of your last CLI online subject. So far, we've discussed how important it is to end your U.S. experience well by showing gratitude to those who have impacted you, as well as discuss strategies for adapting well when you return home. In this short video, we will discuss ways that you can integrate your U.S. experience with your home life and work once you return. A good strategy for adapting well to returning home is to feel like your U.S. experience is connected and integrated to your life back home, not something separate. One way to do this is to proactively share and bring people into your experience, sharing your new knowledge and skills and approaches that you've learned, like we briefly discussed in the previous video. Before moving on, let's take a look at what we will discuss in this module. By the end of Module 3, you can expect to understand the importance of sharing your U.S. experiences to different audiences back home. And you will also develop strategies for effectively sharing the information and knowledge you acquired during CSP and setting realistic expectations for sharing these stories. You have experienced so much while here, both personally and professionally, like we've discussed, and it can feel very overwhelming to know where to begin when you think of sharing your experience with those back home, especially with professional colleagues who may have very high expectations of you when you return. You might feel nervous about returning home and want to tell every detail of your experience to everyone. But this module is all about thinking intentionally about what you want to share, with whom, and why. It is impossible to have your colleagues, friends, and family understand every single experience you had while in the U.S. So it's important to reflect on what is the most influential experience for you while you were here and how can you convey those experiences to different audiences. It's also possible that your colleagues, friends, and family will not all want to hear every single story about your experience, or they might not be able to connect with some of what you want to share. So in this module, we'll focus on identifying what is most important for you to share with your colleagues, friends, and family when you return. So like we've been discussing, your experience is vast, right? You've had so many different experiences while being here. So in this reflection prompt, we will ask you to focus on some of the key experiences that have been meaningful for you. After I share these prompts, I'll then ask you to pause your video to reflect on these questions. What is one example of a meaningful encounter you had with someone in your host organization or community that left an impression on you? What are two professional opportunities you had during CSP that really stood out to you? And what are two specific tools, methods, or strategies you learned in the U.S. At your host organization or in your professional community? So that could be a project you worked on, a conference you went to, anything of that sort. So for now, take a moment and pause the video to reflect on these questions. And we encourage you to write your responses on a piece of paper or journal. So welcome back. Hopefully you've had a chance to reflect on these different prompts. And hopefully what this did is brought to the forefront some of the key experiences that may have had the biggest impact on you that would be most important for your professional or personal community back home to understand. So this is what you'll want to focus on preparing to share, and we will continue to talk about that next. So how can you share some of these stories with your friends, families, and colleagues when you return? Let's focus now on the professional experiences. Here are a few ways that we recommend you share your professional experience when you return home. First, schedule a share-out session. You might be really excited to share everything with your colleagues, but they might have a really busy schedule. So setting aside specific periods of time to share these experiences with your colleagues will be very helpful. You can host a presentation, a brown bag, schedule a one-on-one meeting, anything of that sort to have specific times where you'll be sharing. Second, use visual aids. Utilize pictures, PowerPoints, and other visual supports to convey your experience. This makes the experience more tangible to those. It brings people into your story. So try and use the sights and sounds of your US experience when you share. Next, organize trainings and workshops. Your colleagues might be really eager to learn some of the things that you've learned while here because they didn't have the experience to travel like you did. Share the CLI materials, share the different knowledge you've gained at your organization, share the tools, and this will be really beneficial to pay it forward to those who have been in your home organization while you were gone. CSP will eventually offer you a CLI guidebook later in the year or in early January, which will have compiled material for all of the CLI subjects. That can be helpful for you. Next, make sure that you connect with your embassy, your US embassy if applicable. They often have American corners or some very interested staff in what you are focusing on, and sometimes they can provide space, resources, or professional connections. Next, make sure you start, if you haven't already, discussing your community action project. Bring your colleagues into this idea and into the plans. Make sure you do so within the first few weeks of returning home so that they're aware of what this is, that it is important and it is a requirement of Community Solutions, and how it might play a role in their own professional development. And finally, we really recommend that you include your US colleagues. So can you connect your US host supervisor with your colleagues back home? Can you Skype them in? Can you keep them updated on what you are doing back home? All of this will be really important for sharing your professional experiences. So again, when thinking about sharing stories or bringing others into your community action project, it's important to remember that you will have different audiences back home, right? So you'll want to share different aspects of your experience in different ways depending on the context. For example, you may want to make a concise PowerPoint presentation for your home office upper management. Well, you might just want to get a friendly coffee with your close peer who's of the same age as you and show them some pictures on your phone. So your colleagues might want to learn about the conferences you spoke at, while let's say people in your family might have very different interests as your colleagues. So you might want to choose to share different stories with them. For example, they might be more interested in learning about your cultural experience in the US. So again, you'll want to make sure that you choose wisely with which stories you share with which audience. So next we have an optional activity to help prompt you through the storytelling experience. We encourage you to complete this optional storyboarding activity now or later on your own time. You can find the brainstorming worksheet in the resources below. So this activity is intended to help you structure your stories and tailor them depending on the audience, and being really intentional with what you share with which audience. This can also be used to organize a community action project presentation and can help you plan ahead for what you want to share. The important thing is that you want to make sure you're engaging the right audience and that your stories are useful and meaningful to them. So to begin, create your own storyboard by asking yourself the following questions. First, what story comes to mind that you really want to share? Think about that story and write a brief description of it in the first column on the worksheet. Next, who is your audience? So now that you've thought of the story, who do you want to even tell this story to when you go back home? Next, why would this story be of interest to your audience? Sure, it's great that you're excited and you want to share about your experience, but why would your audience want to hear about that particular story? How will this story help your audience? And next, what results do you expect from sharing this story? What would you like your audience to do, think, or feel after they hear your story? And finally, what tools will be most effective to share this story? And what do you need to prepare beforehand? You want to make sure you're ready to tell the right stories to the right people when you return back home. So take some time and reflect on these questions and complete the worksheet either now or soon before you return home. So after you've thought about these different prompts, keep in mind that not all potential audience members will be as appreciative of other members based on what experience you've had, especially those who might be a little bit envious or maybe haven't had the opportunities like you have had to travel, come to the US, and meet different people from all over the world. Also, keep in mind those colleagues or people in your family or community who may have had to take on extra responsibilities while you were gone. So be very sensitive to their feelings about that, and be sure to ask them about their stories as well. So finally, before we close out this module, let's do a quick recap of our takeaways. First, bringing people into your experiences and sharing the new knowledge, skills, and approaches you've learned is really important to adapting well when you return back home. Second, of course your US experience was vast and dynamic, and it will be impossible to share everything. So take that in and realize that it will not be possible to have every single person in your life back home understand every single thing you went through, which is why we get to number 3. Know your audience and tailor your stories accordingly. When you do so, you have an ability to connect with the people back home in a way that is meaningful to them and in a way that can help them better understand your experience and then benefit their lives in some way as well once you understand why your stories would have meaning to them. So we hope that you found this final CLI subject on adapting to changing environments useful as you think about the transition in your life that's about to take place. By ending your US experience well, thinking of the skills, knowledge, and lessons you've learned, and expressing gratitude to those who have impacted your experience, you'll be better prepared to leave your US host community. And by understanding some of the challenges and opportunities you might experience when you return home, you'll be better prepared to share your experience with your friends, family, and colleagues and adapt to your home context. That way, you can best contribute to the meaningful, positive change in your community. We will discuss this even further at End of Program Workshop, but for now, thank you so much for joining me in these modules, and we look forward to seeing you soon in Washington, D.C. Next, watch the alumni videos and complete the short survey at the end of this subject.